Hi, you're listening to another of our Dental Business Transaction podcast series, and I'm Lily Head, Founding Director, and I'm here today with Abi Greenhough, my Managing Director, and I thought it would be a great idea to catch up and have a chat because I think it's about 6 months, isn't it, Abi, since we last spoke, and it would be a good opportunity to talk about market activity so far this year. We're pretty much through the first 6 months, obviously. We've seen an awful lot of new entrants to the market. We are extremely busy, but we've also seen the usual challenges. There's a lot of recruitment issues, not just in the dental industry, but also a lot of our legal colleagues. And of course, the inevitable change in all the banking, the healthcare. So it's a lots of moving around. From your perspective, what's market activity been like this year?
So compared to when we sat in the depths of winter, now looking 6 months into the year, the number of deals that we're doing as a business has held. So that high level of activity that we saw in 2021 on that resurgence of the market when transactions picked up again have held. Everywhere we're seeing these headlines about the cost of living crisis and inflation. We are yet to see that really translate into any impact on values at the moment, or in fact buyer interest. Like you say, there are challenges in practice. Probably one of the most common conversations we're having in flight deals are the challenges of maintaining the profits within a transaction with increasing pressure for, staff rises and pay increases and replacing staff. So that you're absolutely right. That's probably one of the biggest challenges in the sector at the moment.
Yeah, staff retention, it's the biggie again, isn't it? And of course, as we all know, it's very much driven by geographics as well. Certain areas of the country have an even bigger challenge. And I've certainly read and spoken to business coaches who, advise people to do everything they can to hold on to their team. They're having to pay pretty much what is asked of them to retain staff, to stop them moving around. And this is just something else, more pressure on the principal. But overall, isn't it, the market is still very, very strong, as you say, in spite of the recession, inflation, etc. Demand is strong. Buyer demand, obviously, hasn't waned. And we've not really seen any of those issues that we've touched upon significantly affecting the market, have we? What's the increase in interested buyers since the pandemic, would you say?
When we came out of that first year of lockdown and practices reopened and buyers started to, bid on practices again, over the past couple of years, we've seen an 18% increase in the number of buyers. So on average, we're looking at about 350 fresh buyers, new buyers, each year since 2020. So a lot more interest, and that's from a real mix of buyers as well. That's new entrants into the market, corporate buyers, and I would say the bulk of them are still dentists that are wanting and have got an appetite to buy a practice. And it's worth remembering still the majority of our practices do go to independent buyers.
You make a really good point, because I was asked this the other day by somebody who is from a corporate group, who said, do we see the future of dentistry basically being swallowed up by the corporates and your average first, second, third time buyer, your private dentist, being pushed out? And I genuinely and truly believe that's not going to be the case. There will always be a market for dental practices that will suit small independents or very small cluster groups. Not everything fits the requirements, does it, of the big boys, so to speak?
I'd have to agree with you there. I think now the corporates are taking a slightly different slant and are thinking more widely about their target and what they're looking at. So that fragmented market might, come together and become more consolidated. But I do think there's just so much appetite from independent buyers. There's a big cohort of dental students that come out of dental school thinking, I don't just want to be a dentist, I want to be a practice owner. And I don't think that is going to go away. And, what we've seen is quite a big increase in the number of squats being set up. Our colleague Rajiv Lakhani in dental compliance, I think he's getting practices setting up from cold squat compliant ready. Weekly they're launching new practices. So I think there's a lot more new operators starting from scratch as well.
You make a good point about the squats, Abi, because I can remember going to the first dental trade show after lockdown had finished, and speaking to Rajiv Lakhani and asking us whether at Lilyhead Finance we could help people get finance for squats, because it was a very difficult issue for dentists. And of course now it absolutely isn't. We have seen a huge rise of squat interest and confidence. So that's really good news. Let's talk about the growth in private revenue. What is the sort of general mood that you're seeing out there with the appetite for private versus, of course, NHS? Let's touch upon that.
Okay, so we saw a lot of patients that couldn't get to their NHS dentist go and join practices privately, and I think they're going to stick. But remember, if you are a practice owner and you've seen that rise in revenue and you want your valuation and your sale price based on that number, it is incredibly important that you're able to produce up-to-date management information. Of course, talking to our colleagues at Lilyhead Finance, that's probably one of the biggest challenges at the moment. Getting lending through credit is having absolute bang up-to-date financials. So if you've had an uplift and you want that in your sale price, you need to be able to evidence that month on, month out.
Proof of the pudding. Yeah, absolutely.
So looking back, now we're in the summer, over the past 6 months, comparing to activity that we saw in 2021, there has been an increase in the sale prices represented as a multiple of the profit. In practices changing hands from independents to corporates and groups, we've seen so far this year an 8% increase in sale prices. So from an average of 7.9 multiple to 8.5. And in where the bulk of our deals are, going from dentist to dentist, we've also seen an increase a little bit more in that sector of up 10%. Mm-hmm. So that's looking a really strong start for the year, and really represents that, I think, that increased demand behind the scenes.
Of course, so that's really good news for people thinking of looking at their exit strategy, looking at selling. Interest in the market is still very strong, isn't it, for growth opportunities, organic growth. Whilst there's still interest, of course, in NHS practices, the corporates and dentists are looking to increase the private ratio in their portfolios as well to manage the challenges of delivering NHS dentistry, which we know is a monumental challenge at the moment.
Absolutely. There's real disillusionment in the NHS, and that's for associates working there and also practice owners.
So, Abi, the $6 million question, what do you predict for the market for the remainder of 2022 as you see it?
I think the biggest challenge we've already spoken about is recruitment. That is more challenging in some areas than others. And also the cost of delivering the services. So the cost of your suppliers, your materials and labs going up, and probably the biggest increase is in staff costs to retain your staff. So we haven't seen that translate into lower values yet, but as those profits may squeeze, it could translate into slightly lower values. And I think some areas might be more affected than others because it's a direct relationship between how easy it is to recruit and the buyer appetite in certain areas. We've seen the corporates maybe focus more on the major conurbations. Anything with a sort of a coast and seagulls, they're a little bit nervous about.
So they should be, seagulls. Have you even a bag of chips on the seafront with seagulls over your head, Abby? Trust me, you take your life in your hands.
And I think that there may be, that we're starting to see that most buyers are looking for, particularly corporates, a private focus. They want to increase their ratio, like you said, of private element to their portfolios. So that follows that they're going to be looking for maybe more private practices with smaller NHS offerings. Mm-hmm. That's the same for dentists as well, although they do like that regular monthly injection of NHS revenue. Mm. I think they're switched on now to think, what is the conversion opportunity to convert these patients from NHS to private? And they're also looking for what the growth potential, the right areas to start upselling ethically, getting the new services, building in Invisalign, building in implants. So they're looking for the growth opportunities. I think the challenges for the NHS delivery are going to remain. It's unlikely that the Doctors and Dentists Review Body are going to increase the NHS pay rise anywhere near inflation. So with the challenges that we've spoken about with cost of delivery and also staff wages, the NHS from a profit margin is going to become squeezed, which may make it more challenging to avoid clawback and challenging to deliver, and ultimately maybe less attractive to the market.
Absolutely, especially with practices with a low UDA rate, sort of sub £23 a UDA. Yeah,
we're seeing actually anecdotal reports of areas where you can't get NHS associates to work or relocate to, that they're offering one-off sort of golden handshakes to get people into the area. So the NHS are starting to think about how they can attract dentists to areas to get over some of these recruitment challenges.
Well, they've got to think outside the box, haven't they? How successful have these initiatives been?
I think it's probably too little intervention, too late. We're not going to see, because it's very mixed. There's no national strategy around it. So I think some areas are getting help, and it's going to be, 6 months or years before we see what impact that will have really in attracting those dentists to those areas. And that, of course, now we know that the delivery requirements for NHS practices are 100%. So not only are NHS providers feeling that pressure and feel slightly let down by the NHS, now that pressure's ramping up to deliver, even after Q1 and Q2, where most practices are lagging behind.
Yeah, the heat is on.
Yeah. Of speaking to our colleagues at Denplan and other plan providers, they are the busiest they've ever been in terms of doing conversions. Practices all over the place are considering their position and considering potentially handing their contracts back and making their list, converting it to private. So it's interesting times, I think, for the NHS. So we just have to watch this space, really. And in Wales, they've moved away from the UDA activity contracts, working on like a capitation-based scheme with KPIs. We don't know yet what impact that's going to have on valuations, but ultimately we will have to see how that affects practice profits and really the appetite to work in the NHS in Wales. So we're watching that space carefully.
Abi, let's talk about what's happening with the corporates. We touched upon them earlier about them not dominating and taking over the high street, but what kind of activity are you seeing from them? Because I know historically we always have new embryonic companies coming in, new kids on the block. They come to us, don't they? They register, they want to meet us, they say they want to get 10 practices in their first year and 50, and some of them peter away, some of them do eventually make some kind of presence in the marketplace, but from your perspective with the teams across the whole of the UK, what are you seeing with corporate activity?
We continue to see those emerging groups forming often from other groups. They're forming boards to put forward a credible offer. Some of those are breaking through the glass ceiling and with slightly new offers, I think more creative models of purchasing practices. So where it was very much an amount of consideration and a certain amount held back, there's now quite a few different models where joint venture, so shared ownership, going into partnership, profit sharing. So it's really targeting these dentists that maybe aren't quite ready for the full kind of retirement and sale, where they want to realise the potential in the practice and still want the skin in the game.
Yeah.
So seeing that, and that's really to sort of compete against the classic likes, I suppose, of Dentex and dental beauty partners who offer that partnership and joint venture model. We've seen Portman being very, very acquisitive as Dentex. And I've just heard recently that my dentists now are wanting to come back into the market. They haven't been actively acquiring for about 7 years. They've reorganised their structure, they've sold some practices and increased their private offer now, and now they are looking, to actively acquire going forward. So there's a lot of activity in the corporate market, but again, I think their focus is private practices, or if they are going for NHS practices, they're looking for those with private opportunity within them and with decent UDA rates, because they know that they're potentially going to have to pay associates a much higher rate to attract them.
Well, that's always been the problem in the past, hasn't it? They basically sort of spread themselves, shall we say, a little thin, and you can end up catching a nasty cold, can't you, if you've got too many practices, especially in areas where it's nigh on impossible at the moment to recruit. So I'd imagine that their revisit to the acquisitive table, they're thinking very carefully about where they're going to be planting their flags down.
Absolutely. They just want to manage their risk, really, and make sure these businesses that they buy continue to perform. And those that you would think would be classically, NHS dominant have actually grown their private element of their group significantly. So the likes of Colosseum have increased their private offer, and My Dentist as well. So there really is a shift towards private within the corporates as well as independent practices.
So basically, Abi, in summary, it's extremely busy. It's a very buoyant market. We know the banks are lending. What would you say summarises the overall picture right now, and what watchwords would you give to a principal thinking about an exit?
The market is acutely aware of some of the challenges, I suppose, that we face coming up, although we haven't seen that translated into values and activity yet because demand is strong. I think as a practice owner, you need to safeguard against some of those things. So the focus is on presenting opportunity in your practice and realising opportunity for growth while you're in it. So focusing on strengthening your private offer, or if you're ready for the market right now, how do we present that private potential to the market? What is the conversion opportunity? What is the opportunity for services that aren't currently offered? And what is the opportunity for organic growth? I think if you can get in a growth mindset, whether you realise it yourself or your buyer realises it, that's really where your insurance is for the best deal and the best outcome of your sale.
Good. It's a good summary, and I think really nothing has changed much from that delivery of what to look out for. I think the biggie is the recruitment issues right now in the UK, and I think principals have to be very aware and realistic about the challenges there. So somebody coming in may face the same challenges that they have. They can't magic associates up, and therefore they have to put their listening ears on and take their happy ears off, don't they, and understand that the market at the moment has got these issues with staffing, with recruitment, retention of staff. If they have a great team, that's fantastic, but hold on to them, look after them, because when you come to sell your business, that may well affect the appetite, won't it, for buyers, if they think you're in an area that's a real challenge.
Exactly, because practices, when you buy them, you need them to deliver. You need them to pay off your loan, and you need to be able to be decently remunerated whilst you're there.
So if you're listening to this conversation and you want to explore more about the market, the values, the trends, or just simply get some advice from us, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to help. Abi, thank you for your time today. It's going to be very interesting to see what comes up with the autumn and winter, and I look forward to having a chat with you again soon. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Lily.